Welcome to Better, the podcast about doing better, being better, and leaving the world a better place than we found it. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Better, do better, be better, make the world a better place. I'm your host, Jay, here for part 2 with Michelle Steiner. Part 1 was amazing, so if you haven't got a chance to check it out, please do. Wherever you listen or watch, you can go to betterpodcast.live or just continue to watch on the platform you're on. I think it's probably good to watch part 1 before part 2. And don't forget my book, The Last First Date. It is it's got some pages to it. It's a good, long, but not too long read. It's about 95,000 words, and I think it's pretty good. I might be biased, but that's just what I think. Shauna thinks so too, so it must be. And it must be because I'm telling you, I got the girlfriend that if it wasn't very good, she would tell me it's not very good, and she would tell that to me for me, not to hurt me or anything, but she would definitely let me know that I am being delusional about my dream, which evidently I'm not, because the phone call I got, the FaceTime I got after she finished the last page was a very emotional one. So I hope you guys can get it on Amazon. Pre-order now for the ebook copy, March 1st for hardcover or softcover. And if you're Winnipeg, February 16th, it's the release party. Okay. All right. So I'm going to bring Michelle back in here. Michelle Steiner, we've been talking about the disability that she's had with her life, and talking about stigmas and discrimination and rising above and all the wonderful stuff that comes with dealing with something that people often don't understand. So how's it going, Michelle?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Yeah, so part 1 was great. So we'll just dive right into part 2. We don't need to, go
Okay.
through again, because I want people to go back and listen to part 1. So I want to talk about what it was like for you as a kid trying to deal with this. So there's a kid I know, and he's dealing with probably dyslexia, a little bit of ADHD, a little bit of maybe even a little bit of bipolar. They're in the middle of trying to figure everything out. And I try to do some writing with him, and it's I can see within 5 minutes that he gets very frustrated. He doesn't want to do it anymore. He doesn't want to be there. Starts to act out if it goes on for a little too long. And here's the kicker. Sometimes I know he knows the answer, but he can get so flustered that he can't get it to show up. So for example, basics, right? Like ABCs, a couple times does them right through, no problem. And then the next time it's missing letters all over the place. So did you, first of all, really simple question, did you deal with frustrations because of this early on as a kid? And did you find that you were acting out as a result of how frustrated you were?
I was definitely frustrated as a young child because all I wanted to do was learn like my peers did. It seemed like they had an easy time, and I wanted to make my parents proud and happy, and they always were proud of me. But I think it was really frustrating. I honestly didn't think at a very young age I was good at anything in life. I thought that my life was always going to be a struggle, and if I just got rid of this disability, it would be a lot better. And that was a concern even with the school, especially when I was young. I can remember the teacher saying, we have to really encourage Michelle to try things on her own, because they were really worried I was going to develop learned helplessness. And they said sometimes I was really surprised whenever I would be able to complete something, do something correctly. And they didn't want me to be somebody that didn't think that I could do anything. So that was really difficult for me. I can just remember it was also frustrating because I would study for tests and I wouldn't do well on them. And everybody thinks, oh, you should just study harder. And it was just hard at that really young age. And one of the things that I gravitated towards was reading and writing. My dad read me stories every night when I was a little girl, and I learned to love that. And I also love to write. And my dad found a story that I wrote in second grade, or maybe it was third, about a dinosaur. And he said, "This is really good." And I thought, wow, I did something that I could definitely, that was something that somebody noticed. And that just encouraged me to read and to be able to write more. And that was something that really helped, especially when I was being bullied. That became my world that I love to do. And that really became more even impactful whenever I started as a teenager. I've got involved with a teen writing group that was just outside of our school district, and they had other art activities. And when I stopped being with them, I found an adult writing group, and 20 some years later, we still meet once a month to talk about our writing, and we're in each other's lives. But I sure can't remember feeling frustrated, especially as a young child. And it's just finding what that person loves to do and engaging them about that too can help a lot. Maybe with the student that you work with, finding an activity he likes with reading or writing. I don't know what some of the interests are, but let's say they like sports, maybe reading about baseball players or things like that, and then writing stories what they love, and just encouraging them too to find those things that they can do. Because when I focus on the things that I can't do, I'm always frustrated and I'm really negative. But when I focus on what I can do, and that brings me joy, then I'm much more positive, and I'm just a happier person when I do that.
Did you find that if you started with something you knew you enjoyed doing and you knew doing, that you could then expand upon that?
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
Okay.
And
That's interesting. I like that. That's a
right,
good
I could
approach.
yeah, I could expand upon things that I could do. So I like to read and I like to write. Well, I can become a better writer. Maybe the math, maybe it isn't going to come along, or the driving, but I can certainly do a lot with writing a story. Or I also love photography. That's another thing that I learned to love and helps to keep me positive as well. I'm not able to drive because of my disability. My husband can take me to work, and I have a wonderful coworker that takes me home at the end of the day, and family and friends who can also take me places. But sometimes I might be walking, and I get a chance to literally stop and smell the roses. I'll take
Mhm.
pictures of flowers and other really neat things that I would see. And I think to myself, if I was in the car driving, I would miss that shot.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's just those things, is looking for the good in the situation and being empowered is so much better than being negative and focusing on what I don't have.
Right. Um, you used the term learned helplessness. Was that what you said?
Mhm. Yes.
So that's a thing? I've never heard that term before.
That is a thing. Sometimes people think that they can't do anything, or they can't do something and other people do it for them, when somebody's able to do that themselves. That can be something as simple as, I can't zip up my jacket. Now I can struggle with that. I mean, sometimes I might even struggle with that, or tying my shoes, but I'm able to do it myself. And a lot of times, sometimes people think, well, I can't zip up a coat, or I can't uh, do, I mean, I have a math disability. Obviously, I can't go to college because I can't take a math course.
Mhm.
And it doesn't mean that you're always going to be successful at it. It doesn't mean that it's always going to be, that you're going to get an A in the course, or it's going to just be an easy ride for you, or you're going to be an accountant. But a lot of times people think that they really can't do anything. And there are some limits. There are some things I simply cannot do, no matter how hard I try or how much I want to. But and that's especially really key with kids, and with me being a para, sometimes I want to help somebody so much. And some of that, but that's really up to my students to be able to do the work, to be able to complete the task. I'm there to provide the support, I'm there to provide the encouragement. But at the end of the day, that's their work they have to learn to do. And sometimes just stepping back and even letting them make a mistake, and talking about that and learning through that, is one of the ways that we can help encourage them not to have that learned helplessness on everything. there'll be limits, but there are definitely things that person can do.
Right. So, what would be your best advice you would give to parents that are dealing with, let's say, a student who just not necessarily has a limitation that they can't get around, just feels it's just it's hard to get to that point of success, and they're trying everything they can think of, and it's just not breaking through. What would recommend, if you would recommend anything to those parents to help those kids that are
Well, the
trying
first
to
thing I
get to
would
that learned helplessness?
Right. Well, the first thing I would say is not to give up on them. That's the big thing. And also to get that evaluated by a professional too,
Mm.
whether that's talking with your child's teacher and saying, I'm really noticing that she's struggling. Is this something that you're seeing in the classroom? Talking to your child's pediatrician is another thing too. Just saying, is this part of normal development? Is there something we can do? There's birth to three services as well, free evaluations that can happen. And just to have somebody else's look on that to see, okay, is this something that they might develop later? Or is this something that we're really going to have to work on? I think is a big thing. I also think it's important to sometimes just take that step back and let our kids fail sometimes, or let them struggle with doing something within a safe realm, giving them that opportunity to learn, okay, if I don't do this, then I'm not going to be successful at that, or this way doesn't work, but this way might. And then to just maybe offer the encouragement and the help, but to see, let them try something first too, and to see if it's their thing or if it's not. And yeah, a lot of times, we don't want to do that. We want them to be successful at everything. So we might tell them, "Oh no, you're good at this," when maybe that's just not something they are good at. But to offer that encouragement in that safe place, that it's okay to try and it's okay to make mistakes, and it's also all right not to like everything or to be good at everything, but to get those opportunities for growth and that encouragement to try and not to give up, and then to just look for things that ways to solve the problem.
Yeah, it can be it can be challenging. Like, I was working with the kid last night,
Mhm.
and we just did I just things you enjoy for every letter of the alphabet, right?
Mhm.
And on A, it was APPEL, right?
Mhm.
Apple. And I said, no, and I'm trying to get him to think, what could I have done wrong here?
Mhm.
And I said, sound that out. What does that sound like? Apple. I said, Apple or Appel? And he's like, well, I don't understand. So the L before the E makes it
Uh-huh.
L, and then the E before the L makes it L. And I was like, well, yeah. And especially with the English language, there are so many very vague, blurry gradient lines over the
Mhm.
rules, right? Like move and love, right?
Right.
So like he spelled love, Love, then he spelled move, Moove. And I said, well, you got an extra O. No, I don't. That'd be mauve or whatever he said.
Right.
Like, yeah, and it's really tough to get a 10 to 13-year-old to understand these things, and then the frustration sets in, because it's like, well, English is a stupid language,
Yep.
and I said to him, well, I don't disagree, but it's the language we have. And so, I'm not special. I figured it out. I know he can figure it out too. And I try to always say that to him. Like, look, I wasn't a great student. My
Mhm.
principal told me I was either going to be dead or in jail in my early 20s. He
Wow.
said, there's no other course for you. That's it. My computer teacher told me that I'd be lucky if I could find the power button. And I went on to run an IT company.
Right.
You get these people that have these limiting beliefs, and they pass that on to kids, and then kids just they expand on it in such a big way. Oh,
Mhm.
so they're saying I can't learn this. That means I just can't learn.
Exactly. Yeah.
So now my only option in life is become an NHL player. It's like, well, that's, that's not the way the world works. But I hope you do. I hope you do get a big fat NHL contract.
Right,
Great.
yeah.
You know, but in terms of facing these sort of difficulties, you've had to learn. So I'm sure there have been challenges that you thought were titanium walls in your way,
Yes.
outside of people telling you can't do it, but just that you experienced yourself. What are a couple instances of those, what seemed like a wall but was actually a speed bump, and how did you do better in those situations?
Right. Well, math has always been the big thing. When I was at college, I can remember I was in a basic math class and I could not pass it, no matter how hard I tried. And I went to tutoring, I went to office hours, and I was lucky when I was at community college to get a math waiver for that. And I took another class in replacement. However, I had to turn in the documentation that I did indeed have a disability, and they didn't ask for it, but I went to tutoring and office hours. So that was one of those walls. When I went to university, I was not offered a waiver, but I took a philosophy based math course. And it was really interesting because I knew I had to take a math course for my one of my for my math requirement. And I was wondering, well, do I want to go with algebra or do I want to go with this logics class? And I was sitting somewhere and there was a chess game and somebody asked me, do you want to play chess? We had the shortest chess game in history. I, of course, lost. And I explained to him that, okay, I'm considering what math course to take. And the guy was actually, I think, a graduate student in one of the math departments. And he goes, let me give you some advice. Take that philosophy based math one because in my department, a lot of the guys aren't very nice. And
Mm.
I had the best math. I had the best philosophy professor that I could ever ask for. He was so nice and so understanding. And I did not do well in the class, but he was amazing. And he knew I was trying. I was going for hours a week of tutoring, still not passing tests. I was going to office hours. I was participating in class and I just couldn't do it. And I said, I just need to get a D to pass. And that's all I got. And he was willing to pass me along with that. And that just released a lot because that was always the biggest fear. And after that point, that's all I needed to be able to fulfill that requirement. That was the thing. And that semester I made dean's list because I didn't have math, and it's
Wow.
like it strengthened the side of my brain with reading that was already strong. And I was also able to graduate with the bachelor's degree despite being able to do that. Another titanium wall that really came up was finding a job. A lot of places said they were disability friendly, and it turned out they weren't. Sometimes I could
Mm.
figure that out in the interview. And I can also remember I worked for one agency that I thought was going to be disability friendly. They provided services for individuals who had them, and they really were encouraging if you had a disability to accommodate. But they were so used to people that had physical disabilities, they didn't really know what to do with learning disabilities. And it definitely wasn't it was an HR position with doing payroll.
Oh,
And I
geez.
should have known that was not going to be the job for me going in. I can laugh about it now. And it took me a while to realize that going back to something that I did before, which was being a paraprofessional and working in a school wasn't a bad thing to do. And it was finding that right fit. And I
Right.
never thought that I was going to be able to find job security. And because a lot of my jobs were temporary and I didn't really believe in myself. And I thought, oh, I have to be able to know how to do all this stuff because if I don't, then I'm not going to have that position. And I
Right.
can even remember talking with a friend of mine, and he goes, oh, if I worked in a school, I wouldn't even say that I couldn't do something. I'd want those kids to think I was a god. And it's just not true. I'm not that. So I think it was not only getting past some of the barriers that other people put on me, but it was getting past my own barriers of what I viewed as success and what I viewed as something that was going to fulfill me. And it was just that process of accepting that I have this disability. There will be some limitations, and that's okay. And there might be a barrier here and there, but there are things I can do.
Just as a total aside, what the heck is a philosophy math class?
Intro to logic. So it is a lot of times you will do counter arguments, you'll do truth tables, and they'll do a lot of analogies that come with that. It can also be finding patterns with
Hmm.
numbers. I mean, they found a way to to
That's
be able to. I used to always say I hated numbers, and after that class, I really did. I hated letters for a while because we would have these A's and B's, and um, if not A, then C, then B, and then if not B, then C. And it was difficult. A lot of people who do well in that those kind of courses become attorneys, and
okay.
that was not what I was supposed to do with my life.
That's interesting. Okay. Yeah, I've never heard of I don't know if we have that here in Canada. Where are you
Yeah,
based out of?
uh, the United States,
Yeah.
and this was Intro to Logic.
Okay, so it's called Intro to Okay. Okay, that makes sense.
But it did open my eyes to a lot of things. And the professor even said, when you're done with this course, I don't want you to think, oh, this is what this fallacy is and this is that fallacy. He goes, I want you to be able to, if something doesn't make sense to you, I want you to think about it and question it. And a lot of times I've had to do that. Sometimes I'll get letters in the mail from politicians or letters from
Mm.
other things, and I'll read it a couple times. I'll be like, this doesn't make any sense. And my, my husband will see it, and I'll have him read it. He's like, no, this doesn't make any sense. But it's that questioning and it's that thinking that is so important that I can carry out in my everyday life and just to wonder about things.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. There aren't enough people that question what is in
Mhm.
front of them for sure. And if that's what that course gave you and it gave you your math requirement, then it's a double win, right?
Yep.
Um I I often when I think back to when I was a kid, I wonder if I had undiagnosed ADHD,
Mhm.
simply because I was a horrible student, could not focus on anything. Or sorry, I did wonder if I had ADHD. And then I got to college or university and I was top 1% of my class because I found something that fit for me. So you had to do the same thing. You had to find something that fit
Yep.
for you because of a disability. I had to find something that fit for me because of I don't know, not disability, but like inability, I'll say. And I can see, I always try to find where are the similarities so
Mhm.
that we can kill the stigma of difference, of defining on difference. And I think most people have in some way, shape, or form confronted the problems that you're talking about. And
Right.
if we could all just understand that, there'd be a
Mhm.
lot more tolerance, right? And it would be a lot
Mhm.
easier for people to say, instead of, and it's the example adults set for kids, right? Because kids are mean. Kids are
Right.
just
Yeah.
so mean, but it's because they don't have a good foundational understanding of what it is that's going on or why this is happening, right? And they're not developed enough, and there hasn't been somebody coaching them through what's going on. But you know, uh, to frame it, if you're a parent listening to this and you have a kid that is in the school with someone with disability, to frame it as that's just something they have a limitation to do. Like you have the limitation
Right.
to do this, right? I think that would
Right.
be that would probably make the world a better place. Understanding that that because that is all a disability is, right? It,
Right.
so I don't know. I guess the more I'm sitting here, the more I'm realizing, just how ridiculous it is that there is this stigma to disability, because by the definition I think I talked about in the first episode, we all have some kind of either inability or disability to get a job done. But you've found, so you embraced it. Essentially, you got through
Yeah.
your frustrations. You found the road through to live a better life. Um, is this something that you're gonna live with forever? Is it going to get worse? Is it going to stay the same? Is it what do they tell you about this?
It is something that'll probably stay the same. I will have it all my life. I'll always have a learning disability. And it's just going to be something that I have to learn to find ways to live with it. And it's a lifestyle. I've had this lifestyle since I've been 5. So I've really have learned how to live with having it. There is no cure for a learning disability, and it's just one of those things that you just learn how to live with,
Mhm.
and you find ways around it. Now there is some science with neuroscience saying, okay, we can retrain our brain, but a lot of those activities just have not been effective for me. So
Okay.
for me, it's just I have to something I have, something I have to learn to live with, and being able to just find ways to be able to do that. And there's so many things that have come out with technology that we didn't have so many years ago. And I think that helps out a lot as well.
Right. Yeah. Because like my language inability,
Hmm.
just translation apps now, right? So
Yeah,
if I go somewhere, like if I go to China, I can just put in, Mandarin and type it out or say it into the phone, and then it
yeah,
says it to them, and they're like, amazing, right?
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. And you're able to do that. And for me, it's been with typing, and also I can't read the face of a clock. Well, I can use my phone or I can use my Fitbit. So sometimes
right.
that's a nice thing to be able to do as well. I'm definitely not against educating people on how to write your name or how to read the face of a clock. I think those are good skills to definitely introduce, and if they can do it, great. But I think when you get to a certain point and they're not being able to understand that, then we have to look for something else, or else we're going to lose a lot of students.
Yeah, like I remember you said, I think it was the part one. You said
Mhm.
there was a teacher that said we do not use calculators in this class.
Yes, that was a professor. We use our brains to think.
What a ridiculous way of putting it. I
Right, and
mean,
there are appropriate times to use a calculator, and there's appropriate times not to. If we're doing diagnostic, then we can't use a calculator because we do have to see what is going on within
of
your
course.
brain.
Mhm.
And for some students, that may not be an appropriate thing, but for someone that does have a math learning disability, even a calculator is not going to be helpful, but it's better than nothing.
Yeah, for sure. It's like I can see how it could be similar to a cane,
Yeah,
right? It's just
yeah,
it's just
exactly.
something, a device you're using to level the playing field, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And it's not, a lot of people might say, well, that's not fair. But being equitable, equity and fairness are totally two different things. And it's just to
Yes.
give me that, having that same opportunity, like you said, leveling the playing field for that. So I have that. I still have to work 10 times harder, but I have that where I'm able to access that. And it's just, I'm able to be able to do that.
So that's a that's something that's come up quite a bit on this podcast, is
Hmm.
the fairness of it all. So there was
Right.
that conversation about forgiving student loan debt, and
Hmm.
some people are like, amazing, people could get it forgiven, and then they could, not have that huge cloud hanging over their
Hmm.
head, and they can just go on. And then some people that did pay off their student debt were like, well, that's not fair, I had to pay my debt, so they should have to pay their debt. And then you've got a conversation like, if a calculator can, there's a video I've talked about, I think once or twice on this podcast, that I saw that really hit home
Hmm.
with me. Every time it comes up in my memories, I repost it, and it is this teacher who has all these students on a goal line in a football field, and he says,
Hmm.
"Okay, take one step forward if you have both parents at home. Take one step forward if you are able to go out and eat, once a month.
Hmm.
Take one step forward if your parents can afford to put you in a sports program. Take one step forward, one step forward, one step forward." Right? He did all these different things, and 5 minutes later, he's like, "Okay, we're gonna start the race now." And there's kids that are still at that goal line. There's kids that are now at the other
Yeah.
goal line,
Hmm.
and that really hits home the difference between fairness and equity. And
Exactly. Yep.
and it's just one of those things where you people have to understand that differences don't mean that you're giving somebody an advantage. It means that you're giving someone the ability to even compete. And
Right.
and so if like, let's say for example, a kid has is dyslexia.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the tool for dyslexia would be. Probably autocorrect, I guess, or like Grammarly,
Mm-hmm.
or pro writing aid on their computer or something. But if you have, as you're a writer, so
Yes.
I'm sure you've met the snobbery of the writing community about spell check and all these sorts of things, right?
That was
Um,
more in, yeah, that was actually more in the beginning. People would be like, "Oh, it has to be perfect, and you're not going to have someone to do that." And or grammar check and spell check, all that. I've heard a lot from the older generation. That just makes people more stupid and lazy. But when I was in college, it wasn't just an accommodation for me, but when we were doing our goals for our internship, one of them was I will use to make sure that everything's correct on our journal entries for a class and our papers. I will use spell check and grammar check. There's no shame in doing that. We would rather have you, unless we're doing a diagnostic to see how well you can spell or testing for a
yes.
disability or fluency, we would much rather have you be successful and write a paper that does not have spelling errors or grammar, and also to read through it though, definitely, because spell check and grammar check do not catch everything. And
Yes.
there's sometimes you can have a word that is spelled correctly but it may not be appropriate for that sentence, and to definitely use a writing center. But we would much rather have people that have that opportunity and to be able to write it. I'm
Mm.
not a big fan necessarily of having AI write something for you. However, if you are trying to rewrite something and you're stuck, that might be an option. But it's more like if you can just use the grammar, you can use the spell check to just be able to edit. That's something that just is something everybody can use, not just somebody that has a disability. And it was
Yeah.
really interesting when I used a Hemingway app. I have a slight disability with reading comprehension and grammar, and it's so slight that only you can only pick it up if you wanted to do that. So there's this app, it's called Hemingway Editor.
Yeah.
And whenever you put your information and they check it, and then you get a score and they put all your mistakes, I'm looking at my disability and I'm seeing where that reading disability is and how ways that I can make that better.
Yeah. You learn. I
Yeah.
always, because I
Mm-hmm.
if you try to do it right,
Mm-hmm.
and then you
Yeah.
go and you use spell check, grammar check,
Yeah.
checking for passive voice, stuff like that. You
Yeah.
learn from the use of those tools.
Yeah. You can see that.
Yeah. And you know, and AI is a very interesting conversation when it comes to this stuff, because,
Yeah.
as someone that just finished his book,
Mm-hmm.
I see all the time in my writing groups, people putting up stuff that's so obviously AI,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And I say to them, I'm like, look, AI, like spell check and grammar check, is a tool to say, let's say you're trying to write the orange and red hues of the morning in Nevada were met by
Mm-hmm.
the wisp of vanilla scent
Yeah.
in the air, right? And you're like, oh, I don't like the word wisp. I just can't figure out the alternative
Yeah.
to that. To put the sentence into AI and say, give me an alternative way of saying this without saying wisp. If you've really racked your brain, you've tried to figure it out, and now these are tools of assistance like a cane. And I just find that the people that are like, no, you can't use that stuff, disability or not, they're actually telling people you shouldn't learn.
Yeah. Exactly.
you know I wasn't
Right.
spelling and grammar person that I am today. I was a terrible speller. I had terrible grammar. But I found I learned through those tools. And now, when I gave my book to my editor, she said, there's not a lot to do here. And
Right, exactly.
yeah.
Because yeah, I mean, when you put them through a lot of those things, there isn't. And I think AI is good, like if, like you said, if you're stuck on a sentence.
Mm,
But as long as the whole thing isn't through that, because you want to be able to put your own little personal thing on that too.
yes.
I've had sentences, I'm like, it kept coming up in passive voice, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I cannot get
Yeah.
to do that. And I sometimes it might be a sentence or two. Some places we do submit things they don't want you to do that, and that's fine. I'll
Yeah.
submit it as is. I'll just run it through the grammar check. I'll do the spell check. I'll do the sentences, and sometimes it's just either it doesn't get published or somebody will say, "Hey, I have some minor edits for you. Do you mind doing this?" And
Right.
I'm usually okay with the edits. But yeah, I honestly think some of that's also gone on the wayside too. Now people just, even if you're not a writer and you work in an office or you have to write a report, people want the report. And
Mhm.
if you have to spell something professionally and you're going to use spell check or grammar check, by all means use that.
Yeah. Yeah,
And,
for
and
sure.
to do that, because we want to have people be successful.
Yeah, exactly. And whether it be a calculator, or a pro writing
Hmm.
aid, or
Yeah.
any other tool that someone can use. And now we're going to get into like augmented reality and all these sorts of things. It's
Right.
just great that technology, and you see this a lot with Apple. They talk a
Hmm.
lot about this, is that they want to design tools that are equitable.
Hmm.
And people are like, well, I don't know if that's necessarily, I'm like, that is a good thing, because
Yeah,
I'll always use that football field analogy. It's like
it's true.
everybody can't be good at everything. you
Right.
know we all have our weak points.
Right, exactly. We all have our weak things. We all have things that maybe we can't do or something we need a little bit of extra help with, and that's the beauty of technology with some of that stuff. And it's appreciating if some, and I think it's giving a choice too. If somebody wants to handwrite something and they have beautiful handwriting, then by all
Hmm.
means handwrite something, and that shows one of your gifts. But if you don't, I've never had an editor that has said, I want this handwritten. They always want it typed,
Yep.
thank God. And I can remember when I was in school, I had a peer that said, well, if you want to be a writer, you have to learn how to be neat. You have to write neatly. And I've been able to be successful without that. And the same thing goes like with a watch or a clock. If somebody wants to read an analog clock and they want to teach kids how to do that, great. That's fine. And if that's your choice that you want to do in life, but if the kid decides they want to get a digital watch and they just can't do it, then don't shame them for doing that either. Give them that choice that they can have. And I think that makes things fair as well.
Yeah, I think as long as there's some effort
Yeah,
ahead of the
right.
change to the alternative, I think there's nothing wrong with that. That
Yeah.
kid can still tell you the time at the end of the
Yeah,
day.
just I might tell it to you on my digital thing. And I still kind of cringe whenever people will say, well, you're not always going to have your phone with you, or you're not always going to have a digital watch. And I'm thinking, when they become adults, that's something they'll have to decide they want to do.
Yeah, for sure.
And you
Absolutely.
make the effort now, teach it, because it's definitely something that I think they should have some exposure to, but it's not a deal breaker in being successful in life.
Yeah, I guess where I'd like to end this is, so I've
Hmm.
talked about my inabilities and you've talked about
Hmm.
your disability. W- There's really, what's the word I'm looking for here? I want to word this very carefully, because the internet,
Hmm.
um, there isn't a large enough chasm between those two things that this this conversation has allowed me to frame in my mind. So, for example, I'll word this better. Sorry, guys, I'm just trying to figure out how to word this properly. I went to Under Armour last year at some
Hmm.
point. And I remember I walked in and it was a madhouse in there. It was one of those
Hmm.
sales that everybody wanted to get something from. And this girl came up to me who very clearly had Down syndrome. Okay.
Hmm.
She was an employee of the store, which already I'm giving you points, Under Armour, for doing that. And she asked me if I needed anything. I said, I'm looking for this very specific item that I don't even know
Mhm.
if they have. And she goes, I know where it is. And she's like, come with me. So we came, and like underneath everything along the side of this wall, tucked away, is the thing I was looking for. I said to her, how the heck do you even know where that is? And she said, I have a photographic memory.
Yep.
I said, you have a photograph. Like, I've always wanted a photographic memory. That would be amazing, right? I said, you have a photographic memory?
Mhm.
And she said, yeah, there's lots of things I can't do, but I can tell you how many fries are in every box of every fry kit in the food court if I'm sitting there for longer than 2 minutes.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
And it
Yeah.
just changed for me in that moment. This conversation brought me around to that again.
Mhm.
And that is, everybody has an inability. That's one takeaway I want people to have from this episode. And there's no shame in inability, because there can only be shame if people keep hitting you over the head. You have this inability, which means you have an inability in all things, and then it prevents you from doing anything. But it's okay to have an inability. It's okay to have a disability. It's okay to have
Mhm.
limitations. And just, what is the number one way you think, if somebody doesn't have a support system, where they can get around to this frame of mind where they can realize, hey, yes, there's something that's not quite at the level others have, but you probably have other things that you can do that can compensate for that or make it your life whole. If somebody doesn't have the support system, what would you say would be the best thing for them?
One of the best things I could probably say is call Office for Vocational Rehabilitation. They're in every community. They're called different things, and maybe just setting up a meeting with them to maybe talk with them about some of that. That could be one thing they could do. Also, thinking about the things that you are good at and the things that you like to do, and finding a way to be able to make that part of your career. Or if you're not able to make a part of your career, maybe it could be something you could do on the side that you like to do, and it brings you enjoyment with doing that as well. But I would just really reach out, and there's also communities online too. I've met so many people. There's one good thing about the pandemic that came about, well, and the internet, it is meeting a lot of different groups that meet online, uh, and finding them, and just finding other folks that might have something that you might have, and talking with them and how do they do stuff like that. Because I think when you meet people who have disabilities that might have the same one as you do, yes, you can share the joys and the struggles of having one, but there are also people as well that have interest. And I think sometimes just reaching out, you'll find somebody that likes maybe the same things that you do. Maybe you'll find someone in a book club or an art group or a sporting event or something that you can find with other people. And in-person stuff is great too. But I think a lot of before COVID, there wasn't a lot of groups that met in person, or even online, about having a disability. And
Right.
yeah.
Huh. Okay. Well, um, I know that my last statement slash question there was a
Mhm.
word salad. And what I was trying to get at was that is that um if you are if you have a disability, or you have somebody in your life that has a disability, it's perfectly okay. I think is
Mhm.
the message I want to get across. It doesn't mean you have to define somebody by their difference. You can define them by what they're good at or what they enjoy, as opposed to being like, well, look, they can't do that. I
Yeah, exactly.
I
Mhm.
think you're very fortunate to have had the support system you had.
Mhm.
And I think it's amazing that you were zigging when you had to zig and zagged where you had to zag, and that you're able to find a full life, because I'm sure there are people there in your position that weren't able to pull that off. And you've given people a good place to start if they find that they're listening or
Yeah.
watching this and they're in that funk. Is there anything else you want to say before we go?
I just would love to encourage people that success doesn't always come in the package that you expect, but sometimes it comes in something a lot better.
Right. Yeah, I like that. That's awesome. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Michelle. I really appreciate you being with me on Better.
Thank you.
Um, Everybody out there, takeaway, like I said, disability and inabilities, they're out there. And, I have a friend that can speak 12 languages, I think. Shout out to Adrian. And I can only speak one. And, but I will clobber Adrian on a basketball court. There's always ways to look at the glass half full. There's always ways to look at the positive side of a situation. And at the end of the day, everything comes with kindness, good character, and patience, and your ability to just look past what you've been told and keep your mind open to learning about new things and new ways that people can live life, and how that can fit within the community. And we should all be treating each other better as a general foundation for life, but also we should always be looking to accommodate when accommodations are needed, because accommodation can lead to somebody realizing that they have the ability to do what Michelle's done, and they're not defined by what it is they can't do, but they are defined by what they can and what people can find appreciation for them through. So thank you so much for tuning in for this two-parter with Michelle Steiner. And I hope you've learned. I hope you've grown. I hope you're better. And don't forget, betterpodcast.live. That is our website. Go check it out for all of our feeds, all of our social and everything. And I will see you guys again in another episode later. Thanks for checking out Better. If you got to the end, it must mean you liked the episode, right? So how about 5 stars? Maybe a sub, maybe a share. Great universal common points. And good luck on your better journey.